All right. Hi, everyone. So we know my name is Maeve, so if you need anything tonight, just let me or Maria know. But I am honored to introduce Gina Barreca for Fast Famous Women. So what do Sylvia Plath, Taylor Swift, Helen Keller, Sally Ride, Toni Morrison, Lizzie Borden, and Billie Jean King have in common? They're all stars and fast famous women. 75 essays of flash nonfiction, the latest volume in Gina Barreca's Fast Women series. As in previous titles, brilliant, well-known writers and columnists with established voices are joined by a chorus of emerging writers from diverse backgrounds, some of whom had never seen their work in a book with an ISBN before. New works by Jane Smiley, Mimi Pond, Molly Peacock, Phillis Levin, Cheryl Della Pietra, and Ebony Root offer provocative and deeply personal reflections on the women in the public eye who shaped their own visions of a woman's life, talents, roles, and possibilities. Fast Famous Women is, in effect, the most glamorous of great dinner parties, welcoming all readers to the world of women's lives lived in public view. Now, the wonderful Gina Barreca is author of 10 books, including the best-selling They Used to Call Me Snow White, But I Drifted, Babes and Boyland, and It's Not That I'm Bitter or How I Learned to Stop Worrying About Visible Panty Lines and Conquered the World. Gina has appeared often as a repeat guest on CNN, Today, NPR, Oprah, and Good Morning America. I also just want to say Gina is such a great, amazing friend to RJ Julia Booksellers, and she just gave a great little interview on the 35th year that we've been open. So Gina, thank you so much for being here with us tonight, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
I'm so proud to see so many people I know that I don't actually owe money to. It's very nice. Sometimes people show up for other reasons, so this is nice. I'll give you the money after. But I feel like I should shout out to everybody, but I'm not going to do that because we don't have that much time. But one of the things that just delighted me, which is that I've got a couple of cards. I don't think you have the quotable card, but you have the Borealis card with my little quotes on them. I have, you don't make real money selling books, not so much anymore. I don't. I mean, the people who have their own entire sections do, but the cards have really done well. So it's really, I got more dough for getting a little publishing with quotable cards than I have for many of certainly the academic books that I've written. But this one says, after a certain age, women have about 4 taste buds left, one for vodka, one for wine, one for cheese, and one for chocolate. So this is what I'm known for, which is something that no doubt somebody would arrest me for who will be in another state. So I'm just very glad. And the other lines that are out there, I'm not sure if the card is there, but is something I really believe is true, and sort of tonight's gathering more or less proves, which is that it's not that diamonds are a girl's best friend, but it's your best friends who are your diamonds. That they're tough enough to cut glass, they're made under pressure, and just as there's no such thing as a fake diamond, there's no such thing as a fake friend. You can tell them apart from each other, because the minute you get into hot water, they don't fall off. So, the real diamonds in your life will stay with you. And Roxanne Cody, owner of RJ Julia's, founder of RJ Julia's, has been one of those diamonds in my life. I gave a reading here in 1991 for They Used to Call Me Snow White when we directed. And it was, really the emergence of my life as a writer who was able to really connect with audiences. And it's so gratifying. It's such a pleasure to be here after all of those years, to still be able to be here and to still be making new voices enter the world as well as my own. So we really, again, we got a lot of the contributors here. We have a lot of people. I would love to have everybody come up and read. I don't think Meg Moore is here, who's one of the authors for the book and a writer of other books herself. I'm going to knock anything over while I'm here. And old friends are here. There's Eileen and Chris in the back. And my good friend who was in my first class at UConn, okay, Laura Rossi, who is also the best publicist in the world, but who started working at Penguin and Viking when that's who published Snow White. And now she's moved up many places in the world. So can I take a look? Who are the other contributors that I haven't met yet?
You want us to stand up?
All right, stand up. Every contributor, stand up. Come on, contributors, stand up. Hey! And there's Meg over there. Can you say something about yourselves? Meg, do you want to start or should we come back to you? What would be the best thing?
Come back?
Come
Yeah,
back?
come back.
Okay, that's great. Laura.
Laura Rossi, I wrote about Taylor Swift with my daughter Julia, and Gina and I just realized we've known each other for 38 years. She's a lifelong friend and mentor.
Well,
Thank you.
one of my diamonds. Thank you. But the piece with Taylor Swift is it's a mother-daughter combination. We have another mother-daughter combination over there, but we have a mother-daughter here, but you haven't written for me yet, Tilly. Right? But, yeah, right.
I'm Eve Emerson. I wrote about Queen Maeve. I'm not doing enough on when I was your student.
Okay.
That's my little kids.
Yeah,
You don't need to do it.
Exactly.
So,
I found everybody when they're early.
Kim Hansen. I wrote about Margaret Sanger in Fast Famous, and I also have a piece in Fast Fall.
And fast falling, absolutely. We have little stickers for fast falling up there.
and I wrote about Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah. Oh, it's just so wonderful. The writers got to pick who they wanted to write about, although I did a little assigning for people.
Mary Lasley, I wrote about Mary Shelley, or it was originally about Mary Shelley, and then it moved to how I was weird in high school.
There's a direct link. And Mary also designed the cover of the book. Thanks to Mary. So it's another mother-daughter combination. It's great.
Hey, I've got I'm a circus historian and I wrote about Annie Oakley.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody who's got a gun in their hands gets it. Yes.
Hi, Gal. I wrote about Morrison. That was actually a very express.
Yeah, so right this class you come from. Thank you.
I'm Meg Moore. I wrote about Bethany Hamilton.
And it's wonderful. So thank you. I'll just tell you a little bit about the origin of the book, and then if people could, it will depend on time, if people can actually read their first lines. But the first book in the series, which is published by Woodhull Press, which is a Connecticut press, again, I like to grow people in publishing. I sort of grow them from stem cells, really, so that Laura and me were very early in terms of that, and into publicity, into marketing, into everything else. The Mary was in the creative writing class again with Pascal, and they're both great editors and great artists, and they're out there doing their work. But Dave Legere is one of the founders of Woodhull Press. He was also my student. So I just need to grow an agent. I haven't had one of those. And it's rare to actually be able to grow an agent, but it's we're working on it. There are clone things happening for that. But obviously teaching has been a big part of my life. It's been a great day job. I'm a board of trustees, distinguished professor of English literature at UConn. And my students have always inspired me, and other women's voices have always inspired me. And for this book, so the first one was Fast Funny Women, which is what Dave first asked me to put together because my work has been on gender and humor. It's both my academic work and my love in terms of subjects. And so Fast Funny Women seemed like a great beginning. And then it did well. We won a couple of prizes, people liked it. And then so we did Fast Fierce Women. And then we did Fast Fallen Women. And now it's Fast Famous Women. But this one was dealing, so it's been 4 books in 5 years with 300 writers which is, remember, some of you are old enough to remember on Ed Sullivan when they had people coming out spinning plates, right? So it's been like spinning a lot of plates over the time. But this time for fast famous women, because people were not only writing themselves, but they were writing about the women that they chose as their public figure. So it really was like having 150 people in the book. So that, because it was them telling the stories, so that the process of it has been, like I said, daunting. It's been a lot, but people came up with their own wonderful ideas. And as you'll see from the table of contents of the book, we did a poll line for everybody so that there's something to give you a sense of what's going on. So that, for example, Betsy, who I've never met before, right? Have we met before?
We have now.
We have now. It's like a blind date. This is fabulous. This is absolutely fabulous. But Betsy, who's a brilliant writer, has a new book coming out. What's the name of your new book?
It's called Jumping Through Hoops. It will be coming out June 10th, and RJ Julia is doing your pre-order campaign and release event.
Yes, ma'am. That's great. That's terrific. But Betsy is the one who wrote about Annie Oakley, and I'm going to put my glasses to read it right. So, like Annie Oakley, right, was a figure that became almost mythological in terms of her being out there as part of these Wild West shows. But Betsy says Annie Oakley's most famous bullseye might have been the one that she landed in 1903 against William Randolph Hearst and his newspaper empire. Because she takes Hearst to town, she sues and wins in almost every case except one.
And the one they admitted
It wasn't even real.
nobody would have believed it anyway.
Right, nobody would have believed it anyway. So that's, then we have other wonderful and sort of surprising people. So that, for example, Linda Button, right, who's an old friend of mine, but who's worked in marketing and PR, also in writing, doing a lot of business writing, right? She's done a lot of business writing in her time. And so she writes about Lizzie Borden. Now, my students don't know who Lizzie Borden is, but most of you know who Lizzie Borden, right? Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave it, right? This is come from Ron. And so Lizzie Borden, what Linda writes about Lizzie Borden is Lizzie Borden, and she's writing in Lizzie Borden's voice, says, I had to make plans and then execute. So it's a wonderful combination of using business speak, right? Executing the plans for this person who chopped up her family, but again, got away with it, right? Lizzie Borden got away with it because the all-male jury, right? Because that was a jury of your peers, were then still all-male juries. And they were saying, her defender was saying, you know, one of the reasons that they were going to convict her was because it was blood on the dress that she tried to burn and bury, as one does. But then the prosecutor said, I'm going to present to the court the fact that there might be other reasons that a woman might have blood on her dress. And you could imagine the entire jury of these men going, no, she's free, free her. Free her. Let's talk about menses. Do not, no, let her go, let her go. I don't care if she has a head and a bone in her bag. She is free because we are not having that discussion. We are not having that discussion here. So we have, do people know Beverly Cleary, the children's writer? So Alison Uminger, who is also a writer of YA fiction, writes about Beverly Cleary. The fact that love is not always perfect doesn't make it any less true, which I think is just a beautiful line. I'm skipping ahead here so that we have Mimi Pond, who is a best-selling graphic artist, a cartoonist. Her book on Nancy Mitford. Her book on Nancy Mitford is coming out next year. It's actually on the Mitford sisters. And so Mimi writes about Jessica Mitford. Here's the interesting thing. The Mitford sisters all did exactly what they said they were going to do. And that's in all caps. But that's enough to make a woman famous, or at least notorious. Because one of the things that we were dealing with, putting the book together, is what is fame for a woman? Fame for a woman is different from fame for a man. Men are supposed to be famous, right? Like, that's their own burden. I think men have, the straitjacket of masculinity is as confining as the straitjacket of femininity. It's just tailored differently. So that, men are supposed to go out there and be famous, but women are not supposed to be seen or heard or written about or enter the public sphere. Even now, I would say that that's still difficult. Women still apologize for everything. You notice that? Right? So if you go up and you say, you wrote something brilliant, this is terrific, they go, oh no, it should have been better. I should have, if I had another week, I could have done this, I could have done this. It's like, you go up to a guy who published a blog on Substack and you say, good job. And they go, well, yeah, it's going to be bigger. I'm going to be all over the place. That the level of confidence is absolutely astonishing. Mary Lasley writes about Mary Shelley. I imagined her as a disaffected teenager, helping me dye my hair blue, sitting next to me while I tore up my jeans and wrote poems on the rubber soles of my sneakers, which I think is just wonderful. Pascal, writing about Toni Morrison, says, thank you for showing me that intelligence is useless without empathy. Which I think should be on one of those cards. I mean, that's just an astonishing line. Kim Hansen talking about Margaret Sanger, and you all know who Margaret Sanger is, right? Margaret Sanger's early career as a nurse in the 1912 tenements of New York gave her an unflinching view of poverty and the economically disadvantaged immigrants who have children they could not afford. So, I mean, talking about this is what this woman did, nothing prepared Margaret Sanger to be Margaret Sanger, except her dedication, her fortitude, her strength, and her refusal to be shut up. And that is what a lot of these are about. Lucia Campari. Gina okay, Gina, another Gina, okay. About Nancy Pelosi, the Italian broads, right about the Italian broads. And says about Nancy Pelosi, I will bring them down and slow clap as I watch them go. Which, not that we're bitter. Neve Emerson, I'm gonna save you. I want you to come up and read a little piece of yours after, okay? Who else is here? I want to read your pieces. Anybody else that, oh no, Janet left. Elizabeth Morton. Janet Yellen. Where's Janet Yellen? What page you want? Do you know? 188. Okay. Janet Yellen, when the 78th U.S. Secretary of the Treasury remembers her childhood, she sees the same landmarks I do. So it is the sense of connection that women felt. And most of the writers said that one of the themes going through it is that they couldn't have been who they were if these women hadn't been, oh, and Meg, that, sorry, there's Meg more, that women have, the people here have inspired them, have made sure that there was a path that they could follow. So, all right, I'm going to read from Meg about this astonishing woman. Let's see what, all right, Margaret Marianne Moore about Bethany Hamilton. From my pain and perseverance came more strength than I knew I had. And actually, that's a great way to sort of bring the topic together because it is about, hey, Ebony is here. Ebony, let's find Ebony's piece. Where's Ebony's piece? Which is also brilliant. You came up all the way from New York? You were here, okay, because it was like, I'll pay for the tolls back. You know, it's really tough to come up for this. What page you want, Ebony? You know? I know in every collection I'm in, I know exactly the page I'm on. That this is, you know, it's one of those things. Ebony Murphy wrote about Flo Kennedy, who was one of my favorite people. She has some of the great lines. I quoted Flo Kennedy in the first book I ever did. She was an activist. She was in court, a Black woman who would not be shut up. And so that when she came wearing a pantsuit, she was one of the first women to wear pantsuits in a courtroom in front of a male judge. And they went up and said, I don't know if we are going to allow, right? We're going to allow Ms. Kennedy to present in pants. And she said, Judge, you don't talk about what I'm wearing, I won't talk about what you're wearing. There's these guys in gowns who were doing this stuff, and she wasn't gonna let it go. And also, Flo Kennedy has one of the best lines that I remember a speaker coming to talk about when I was in college and quoting Flo Kennedy, because I graduated from, I'm 60, I should tell you, I'm 68 years old. So everybody knows, I'm 68 years old. Thank you very much. I weigh 154 pounds. That's the other thing that women want to know. The woman behind the mic is like, because otherwise, again, we guess each other's age and weight like we're at a state fair. Weighing something, right? And so it's one of the things that I've spoken about that, in fact, I've been lucky enough not only at RJ Julius, but to be a return speaker, a return reader at different events. And there was one woman who came up to me and in a very, a pernicious tone of voice said, Gina, you lost weight. And I said, no, this is all factory issued, it is the same since I've been 18. It goes up and down like a glacier. This is what it is. And I said, the last time we saw you speak, you were wearing like a muumuu. And I said, I could just afford better clothes now. And then she asked a really scary question, which is, what size are you? And I thought, okay, I'm all about telling the truth. It's about nonfiction. I don't make anything up because I think if you listen carefully enough in life, you don't need to invent anything. You just need to write it down, especially when it comes to humor. So I thought, all right, I'll be honest. What size am I? I said, in Armani, I'm a 12, right? At Dot's Dress Barn, I'm a 22W. Because we all know that the more we spend for our clothing, the smaller the size will be. And if I could make real money, if I really, it was cashing it in, I could be in single digits. Right? I mean, I could get into an 8 in like those St. John's suits that they steam onto your body. Right? And I actually bought one of those at Nordstrom's Rack to be at a friend's wedding. It was her 4th wedding. Which is again the triumph of hope over experience. And she asked us to wear St. John's suits, and those things are like you could buy a small car for a new St. John's suit. So I went to Nordstrom Rack and I got one. I think that was a 10. And the lady said, we can steam it onto you. We can steam it to your size. I'd never heard of that. And I thought, okay, let's do that. I felt like a shrimp. And it was like was steaming me to serve me. And actually, in the wedding photos by a professional photographer, I look terrific. But here's the front on. Sideways, I look like I'm in the larval state. I am just emerging as something else, and it doesn't look like I'm going to be a butterfly. This is not it. But so again, I graduated from college in 1979. Right, it was one of the first classes of women at Dartmouth College, which is what Babes in Boyland was about. And but there were feminist speakers who were coming in for the 6 girls who had actually been admitted that year. And not really 6, but it was a 7-to-1 male-female ratio. Right? And she was quoting Flo Kennedy. And she was saying that, do you ever have men come up to you and say, you're a feminist? Does that mean you're a lesbian? Right? And it's true that men would come up and go, when our grandfathers, they chip and skip and trace. And they would come up and say, when our grandfathers went here, that were no women, why did you come to a male school? And I was like, there are a lot of reasons for that. And for 3.5 years, I would try to give a reasonable answer. And I said, because when your grandfathers went here, there were no indoor lights. Sometimes things get better. But Flo Kennedy said her line was, when people said, are you a lesbian? Her answer was, are you my alternative? I just thought, okay, that's the answer, that's the answer. First of all, it's none of your business. It doesn't affect you in any way. But Chester, you my alternative. And I think that that's just a wonderful thing. But when Ebony wrote about Flo Kennedy, this is what she says about Florence Kennedy, I should say. I call her Flo like I knew her personally, but I feel as if I did. So now I'm trying to find Ebony again. Ebony, did you remember? 113, good work. Okay, I've never been good with numbers. 113. Here we go. And Ebony writes about Florence Kennedy, which comes right after a piece on Lily Tomlin. Hey, come up and read the beginning. Read the first paragraph, and then we'll go to me, who will also read the first paragraph. Come on. A former student who still teaches at St. Anne's School in New York City. So we should be up to the Yale campaigns here for women. Ebony is the real thing.
I often ponder the lives of women who lived before me in much harsher circumstances than I have had to endure. I hold in utmost regard women who thrived under virulent sexism, soared above open racism, and attained impressive levels of education, made art when they could have made excuses, and crafted beautiful lives, even and especially when money was short. Florence Ray Kennedy, she of the quick wit, jaunty hats, political buttons, and a gold whistle she wore to blow the whistle on the man, is one of these women.
But I mean, isn't that just great? Does it also make you want to read everything about Florence Kennedy and read Florence Kennedy? And that's what's going to happen when you start to look at the book. It's like we all, I was arrogant enough to think that I understood what people were going to be writing about and the people that they talked about, but because of the personal connection that people felt as they were writing, it really grew. Neve, come up and talk about, please, come up and talk about, oh, you have a little, right now, good job. Okay, so Gail and pronunciation.
When I was 5 and my sister was 3, my parents took us on an adventure. We climbed to the top of Queen Maev's grave or cairn, located at the top of Knocknarea, a mountain in Sligo, Ireland, our hometown. And it really is a mountain, not a large hill. Mom packed snacks and Dad filled us in on the legend of Queen Maeve. My sister and I were very excited about the snacks. What we remember about that adventure is it was a beautiful day where sunshine hit every crevice of Sligo and you could feel the warmth in your belly. We laughed a lot. I don't remember what was funny, but the sound of the 4 of us laughing is one of the first things that comes to mind when someone mentions Queen Maeve. And as the story goes, if you're going to visit Queen Maeve's grave, you have to bring a stone with you to add to the top. As toddlers, we spent an especially long time picking just the right stones. But who was Maeve, and what did she do to merit a cairn on top?
How about reading? Thank you. Take a full line. The part with the full line.
All right. Maeve's father, the High King of Ireland, married her off to her first husband, but after giving birth to his son, she was done with that guy. Maeve's father kept her busy, however, by removing Tinny McInroy as King of Connacht and made Maeve Queen of Connacht in his place. Maeve had several men in her life and at one point made it known that her mate should be without fear, meanness, or jealousy. Ancient mythological queens, they're just like us.
So ancient mythological queens, they're just like us. But when you read about the women's lives that are being described here, you have a sense that there were the worlds that they created that they let the rest of us into. And that's what's incredibly important. So I'll read a bit from my introduction about which, explains a bit about my sense of what fame does, what fame is. So I once opened for Joan Rivers. She was coming from New York to do a fundraiser and more than 3,000 fans with the Bushnell Center for the Performing Arts in Hartford, Connecticut. Some of you have been there. I was there to warm up the crowd, the academic version of a local garage band. Make sure everybody was in their seats and behaved and introduce her. And as somebody who spent her life working on women's comedy, Rivers was one of my idols. I could recite several of her older sets by heart. And one of my favorite lines is, I have a friend who's not good with her medication, and she confused her birth control pills with her Valium. She has 9 kids, but she doesn't give a shit. How can you not like that? So eager as I was to meet Rivers and as devoted as I was to her work, I was entirely unprepared for how tiny she was. You could have put her in a happy. Right? She's a little tiny lady, which is also, I grew up next door to Judge Judy. To Judge Judy Schuyler, and then she was Judy Blum, and who was also a wee person. It's a little tiny person with a big presence, right? And Judy is exactly who you think Judy is. When we get together and our husbands like each other, thank God, but we'll pick a very private little restaurant and we'll go and we'll start talking, and our voices rise as the evening goes on. So at one point we were sitting in some place and she was going, no, it wasn't your cousin Toni I liked. It was Joey. I had the crush on Joey. I'm going, I swear it was Toni. The stories they told, because she's a few years younger than I am, older than I am, not that you would know it. And she's like, no, I was in love with him. I would have done anything. And you could see my Michael and her husband sort of going like, shh. And I'm thinking, this is where these 2 girls from Ocean Avenue in Sheepshead Bay, and we're going to speak as loudly as we want, and no one is going to tell Judge Judy quiet, including her husband, but she's so she was amazing. Rivers was amazing. After listening to my short talk and introduction, she came up to me on stage and said, I hate you. You're funnier than I am. And she said, I hate you with such natural affection and authentic appreciation that it was like getting a hug and a bouquet of roses. Joan Rivers announcing, I hate you, made me feel loved. Okay? Wow. And here's what it is. Why do famous women matter? Why do famous women matter? We look towards famous women to see how they did it, right? Women say to each other a lot, also, I don't know how you do it. How do you do it? How do you do this? Every woman here has heard that, as if, first of all, that we're incapable of doing anything, not for nothing, but that it seems we're comparing ourselves to each other, and there aren't all that many versions of women who are willing to be out there on the platform and saying out loud what everybody else is thinking. I don't invent anything. Like I said, I listen, tell stories, I put things together, but they're not invented. So looking at how other people did it is really important. But when there are not that many female figures in the public eye, you think, oh, she's like that. She's successful because, God knows what she did to find her way to the top, right? Because, she came from a fancy family. It was easy for her. But like Ebony said, looking for people who are not making excuses, right? We're not making apologies. So many of the writers in this collection express their gratitude to the women that they've chosen as their focus, saying, in effect, without you, I could have not imagined becoming myself, right? That we look and we go, okay, this is somebody not only who inspires me, but this is somebody who gave me permission, okay? Because that's the other thing that we're often looking for is permission. It's like, can I do this? What if I do this? Will anybody still be my friend? Will anybody like me? Am I going to cause envy if I do this? A lot of women walk around with some kind of evil eye amulet around them, to make sure that it's deflecting whatever envy is out there. So even discussing the word famous is hard. Does the nuance of the word famous change when applied to women? Well, let's ask the question this way. is famous, in fact, the worst F word you can tell a woman, right? Because, I mean, a feminist for a long time was the worst F word you could call them, right? I mean, it is the F word. And because that people will say, oh, I'm not, especially my students now, it's something that I'm seeing, or some of my students, not all of them, but they're like, I'm not a feminist, I'm a humanist, I'm a whatever. It's like, nah. There are differences. There are differences. Feminism is. Can you, do you have a question? Can you hold it for a second? Okay. Okay. Because the idea of the feminist is, I believe, it applies to men and to women and to everybody, however they identify. But if you believe women are human beings, you're a feminist. Okay, it's not like a tough club to get into. You know, you don't have to wear flat shoes. Although after a certain age, I find flat shoes, you know, I'm really happy. Even Nancy Pelosi is now wearing flat shoes. After that fall, Nancy's in flats. But that if you believe that women, you know, should be allowed to sit at the table, should be allowed to learn how to read, should be allowed to get up and speak, should not only be judged on what they look like as they leave the room. Okay? So, I mean, there's a lot that people will say to your face, but as you're walking out, that was something I learned being in an all-male school, that you're looked at differently from the back than someone else who's exiting the crowd. So the idea of fame is dangerous. Women were not supposed to be famous. You were supposed to have your name in the paper, not when you were born, not the announcement of your birth, because that would give away your age, and that's another, you know, subversive thing to do, because we're supposed to not talk about that. And then the idea that women were in the papers when they got married and when they died. So those were the two things that you were allowed to be in the newspaper for: your wedding date and your obituary. But otherwise, the idea was not to have your name be passed among people. And so with a first wave feminist, second wave feminism, and now with the new feminism, with third wave feminism, it is this, I believe it's the embrace of the understanding that there are differences between human beings, but feminism still matters. And the word still matters. I actually this week, I just joined the board of the Feminist Press in New York. Thank you. And because it is that women face different worlds than men face, and there have to be different spaces for women's voices, which is not all the wonderful men who are here tonight, to whom I adore already, but the idea that women were supposed to be, again, defined by other people, right? And as Toni Beloved says in Toni Morrison says in Beloved, that, you know, the definitions belong to the definers. But that's not the case. We get to decide who we are. We get to say who we are. We get to self-possess, not to be taken over by somebody else, but to possess ourselves and to own ourselves. And the thought that as W.C. Fields, who I don't believe was a feminist, but W.C. Fields said, it ain't what they call you, it's what you answer to, which I think is just a wonderful idea of definition of self. It's what you answer to. So you get to decide what you answer to. They can call you anything they want, and they will, but you get to say who you are. So I'll just end with this and then open it up to questions, or if other people, Pascal, if you want to read, Mary, if you want to read, Elizabeth, if you want to read, we can, I know we're limited. Laura's going, I don't want to read. I don't want
Sorry. What time you close tonight?
Exactly. But so other writers in here discuss what the difference is between fame, celebrity, and reputation. Because when I was growing up, a girl with a reputation was not a positive thing to be, right? I don't know what your high school was like, but oh, that one, she has a reputation. And I was the one, I mean, I had a reputation, but just to be fair, and you do have to pet to be popular. I mean, it's really, no, sorry. It's not, it's very silly, right? It's just fine. It's just fine. But the idea that, a reputation precedes you, it had to be that there was something wrong with you. You were deviant, right? But to embrace that deviance, to say, I'm not going to be what others say I have to be. I'm going to be something else. I'm going to use my skills. I'm going to use my talent. I'm going to use my wit. And somebody is going to, somebody's going to pay attention because I'm going to change the world. And that's what this is about. So the women here really dealt with this. Writers revealed to us in this book stories about boxers, about Supreme Court justices, about chefs, singers, aviators, union organizers, movie stars, poets, and pirates. There's actually a whole thing by Carol DeSanti on pirates, which is absolutely wonderful. I didn't know. Hearing about them, we laugh, gasp, nod, and sigh, and long to enter the conversation to bring our own gifts to the action. We are all heiresses, right? Every woman in this room is an heiress because we have a legacy created by famous women who came before us. And often they are lost to history. There are names here that you'll know, and there are names here that you won't. But they have all changed the world for everybody. We have a legacy created by the famous women who came before us, one we must appreciate and one we must pass along. Finally, because women who achieve public acclaim and fame are necessarily insubordinate, interesting, and unnerving, we know when reading this book and talking about the women represented here, we're in the very best of bad company. Okay? Thank you. I would like to invite, if the other people who want to read, we're part of this. Kim, no, you're passing? Pascal? Yeah, come on up, Pascal. Pascal, like Mary, was somebody who worked on this book in different stages and was one of the great early editors of the text. I trusted because Pascal was in my creative writing class. I knew my students, just by the way, are not allowed to use any electronic devices whatsoever during any class. I teach 2.5, Mary shaking her head, it's hard, right? 2.5 hours I teach, 2.5 hours for each class, no social media. If I see them looking at a watch in their lap, I'd say on the first day of class, I said, you're not allowed, no, nothing pings, nothing, anything, I don't care. And if I see you with your hands in your lap, I'll give you a break the first time because I'll just assume you're masturbating. I can send you to experts who work on campus who can help with that. There are people who are hired to deal with those issues. But if I see you looking at your watch or an iPhone, you're out. There's a waiting list for this class. They're not here. So everybody pays full attention. And then in the creative writing class, they have to write almost every week. But what they have to do every week is to comment critically, a page of comments on all of the other writers in the class. And that's usually about 15 people. So they're writing 15 pages of editorial critical comments about what their colleagues wrote, as well as writing in addition to what they did. Pascal's comments were preternaturally excellent. And so when I needed an editor for the early versions of these essays, it's like, Pascal, I don't get a grant for this, but I make some coin on the side. Can I hire you to be this? And then Pascal chose Toni Morrison. Tell us about that.
I wrote this in the essay, but I first heard of Toni Morrison in college at UConn, and reading her books. I mean, anyone here who's read Toni Morrison knows it's deeply depressing, but somehow also manages to be very beautiful, very touching, very eye-opening, just like totally shifts the way you see and interact with people. So for that reason, I had to write about Toni Morrison for this.
Yeah, everybody, so again,
I hear
it's a new thing, it's got the page, right, we don't have the page. If I, that's if you want to say.
Okay, and I take that line.
We do have 10 minutes, right? We have 10 minutes?
Anyone is in for Q&A.
Yes, I do, of course I do, I want to
You
hear
got it?
from my friends who have
Oh,
questions.
okay.
Go ahead.
Can I tell you a secret? I used to not like Black people. In fact, there was a time I nearly hated them. In defense of my younger self, how else could I react to realizing that the skin I was born with was not enough to protect me from their unfailing ability to other?
Yep.
I could never wrap my mind around what it was they felt they needed to defend. I didn't understand their need to test, their demand for proof of Blackness, and because I didn't understand, I grew apprehensive, almost fearful. I embraced clothes, shoes, music, movies, and TV, stupidly hoping I'd gain something I now know I never lacked. Finding you helps me understand and eventually forgive.
Thank and again, her essay is absolutely beautiful, and I bet most of you have read Toni Morrison, and this gives you, will give us all a different insight, again, to this sense of connection. And that line about, Pascal's line about intelligence being useless without empathy, I think is a beautiful one. Mary, you want to say something?
Sure.
Okay, Mary, and then Betsy. Okay, and then I'll do the questions and answers. I want to hear from writers in the room, people who are readers, or usually writers, or secretly writers, and I love that. Keep talking, okay. And this is something I learned to do in Brooklyn. I will keep talking. And, you know, we got 3 days. That's absolutely fine. We can make this work. And then page 88.
Most teenagers are romantics, but only some are romantics. Capital R. On mid-2010s Tumblr, the social media platform of choice for those too weird for Instagram, there dwelled a small cult of users who did nothing but circulate wild stories about the romantic poets. It was here that I first read the story of Byron and the Shelleys at Lake Geneva in 1816. Cooped up inside by grim weather, Byron proposed that they write ghost stories to pass the time. And Mary Shelley, a teenage girl with my name, sat down and wrote Frankenstein.
There's such personal connection. Betsy, come on up. Okay. And again, it's a blind date for me and Betsy, but I've admired her work. You can read her in many, many places. And what's Conversations with Dead People?
Grace with Dead People, that's my blog.
That's her blog. Read Conversations with Dead People, just to see if anybody you know is in there.
Thank you.
So I was thrilled and flattered that you offered me the opportunity to write about Annie Oakley, because she's so special. I write about circus women, circus history in general, but circus women, and there's such an inspirational example of what it means in times that are restrictive to choose independence and community and work and being different. So, and since by day I'm a lawyer, because believe it or not, being a circus historian doesn't pay the bills. I had to take a legal angle with Annie Oakley.
You choose the board.
Yeah. In 1903, Oakley was at the peak of her career. She was a legendary Wild West performer, had been lauded by Queen Victoria, and had parlayed her fame into a starring role in the Broadway play The Western Girl, written just for her. With her beloved husband, Frank Butler, at her side, they met when teenage Annie beat him in a shooting contest and told him she liked his dog very much. Oakley carefully managed a career that not only celebrated her skill, but also held her up as a model of proper femininity.
Proper femininity, that's a great thing. Gina, do you want to read? Okay, and then I'll open it up to questions. So have your questions ready, because I will call on people. Those of you who have been my students know that too, right? That I just cold call. Everybody has to have something to say. I'm letting you find your page. I'll keep talking. Are you getting your questions together? You have dynamic, subversive, inquisitive, curious. I'll also ask her, obviously, if I tell you my weight, and my size. I'll answer any questions that you have. It doesn't just have to be about the book. I can answer anything you want. You want to talk about publishing, you want to talk about writing, you want to talk about literature, you want to talk about teaching, you want to talk about what flat shoes I'm wearing, which are very comfortable. I have them in 4 different colors. Did you find it yet? Okay. I'm on the shoes.
I wrote about Nancy Pelosi as a pretend campaign email request for money. And which is how a lot of us hear from Nancy Pelosi. And, you know, it just goes to show you that famous women still, they have to ask, you know. So she's writing to me and she's asking me for money. If you've been waiting for a sign to step up with $15, this is it. Gina. I meant Gina. My 10-ish would be good. It gets more and more urgent as it goes on. As Speaker of the House, the first woman in the job, I, unlike some people, knew how to handle a hammer. I wielded that gavel like an Italian mother's wooden spoon. You understand, don't you, Gina? You had an Italian mother, according to the census data that I saw.
One of the really fun parts about the book was realizing because there were, again, direct letters, there were people speaking as, there are all kinds of inventions about communication. There are interviews. There's an interview with Eleanor of Aquitaine in a women's studies group. And Eleanor of Aquitaine gets really pissed off that they keep asking about who was her husband, who was her father. And she said, this is, 500 years later, and you're still asking about the men in my life. Can you ask about everything else? It's wonderfully defined. So you will find something that will make you smile. They're all under 750 words. Okay, so you can read them while you're waiting for something else, which is how much of us spend our lives, right? I'm waiting for a phone call, I'm waiting for a bus, I'm waiting for whatever. And this is
the first book of the playlist.
Yes, and Laura Rousey and her daughter came up with the
playlist.
Taylor Swift playlist. So it's absolutely
conversation. So that's our first ever playlist.
That's right, our first ever playlist. No, it was absolutely wonderful. And for Julia Totton, who might be the youngest one in this particular collection, because she hasn't even graduated from college yet. She's at UVA, Laura's kid. So one of Laura's kids. Laura has 2 kids. And it has just been wonderful to see how people come up with things. And it's exhausting. So I'll tell you that too. But you will find it to be a celebration. You'll like it. You'll want to pass it along. So since you'll want to pass it along, why don't you buy a couple of copies? Okay. I'm just going to make a bid because it is an independent bookstore. The books that you buy here matter. They keep R.J. Julius going. They make it the community that it is. It shows that people are not just showing up to be entertained, but that they're serious members of the world of letters, which if you're here tonight, you are. Thank you. Thank you. Questions? My friend, tell me your name.
Sally.
Sally. Of course, Sally Boehner. Hi, Sally.
Yes.
It's an honor. Okay.
You refer to a group of current women in your classes as being sort of on the cusp of feminism or maybe dubious.
Mhm.
What's your take on the whole trad life?
Oh, the trad life. Okay. Yes, I find it unnerving. I find it unnerving, and I'm somebody and again, this is also something that I think women feel like they have to say. I'm a happily married woman. I made Michael dinner before coming here tonight. Okay, so that he would have something to eat. I mean, this is like, it's what I'm still doing. It's what I still enjoy. I make students, I have students come and eat in my office. There's always food in my office. There's always food in my office. And it seems to be the right thing to do. And most of them aren't eating the candy as much because they want healthy things. And I've started to bring in granola bars. And then somebody told me the granola bars I'm buying are not healthy enough. And I was like, here's a bottle of plain water. Yeah. Then they're saying it shouldn't be in a bottle. And so, all right, you're on your own. Expect me to sign that my time here is done. And if you're offering somebody a bottle of water, it seems like you're trespassing. I mean, I'm at a loss. I'm just going to start bringing bourbon I'm gonna retire soon. What are they gonna do? It'll be fun. We'll make class interesting. But the trademark thing, I think it's attractive. I mean, I think hiding inside a disguise, which I think is what a lot of people are doing, but so it's the same disguises that people have done all along, but it's like, I'm safe here. If this is what I'm doing, I'm safe here. I don't want to be anything else. This will keep me, again, under the radar, but part of a group. Okay? Where it's not about the individual expression of the self, but it's about the idea of gathering people around you that you feel a sense of strength by proxy because you fit into this category. I shouldn't be as cynical as I am, but I do think that there are a lot of people with bad first marriages. I have an imagination that a lot of people who are deciding to lead any kind of cookie cutter life are in fact enacting Seneca's line, which I make all my students write down, because they're choosing safety, right? It's the idea. And Seneca, the philosopher, writes, in seeking to escape our fate, we often leap to meet it, which I think is one of those lines that at 18 they might not get, but I hear from them 14 years later going, I remember that line. And so somebody thinks this will keep me safe. I'll just follow this script that somebody else wrote, and that'll save me from having to justify my own life, having to create my own path. Won't this keep me safe? And then at a certain part in most of our lives, again, for men and women, most of our lives, we realize this isn't safety. This is not a safety net. This is a noose, right? The difference between a safety net and a noose is just a matter of degree. So you have to choose what you're going to use as an adventure. And again, since there's as much likelihood as failing in something you don't love as there is in failing something you love, and something you love, you might as well choose what you love. So it makes me nervous, but I continue to have hope.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Yes, thank you.
Hi, I have two.
Tell me your name.
Lauren.
Lauren. Hi, Lauren.
Hi. Two things. One, for all those who contributed to her book, please look for this pink sweatshirt because I would really like to have you all sign my page because I really think that, you know, I'd like to have those signatures who wrote these really empowering things. So please make sure that you see me. But nice. Second of all,
thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you very much.
I think it's really special to have everybody's page. While you talked about wait lists to get into your classes and you've been teaching all these years, what have you seen different demographics, like more male, more female? I mean, like, I presume, and I'm just guessing, because I'm close to your age, that you probably had more females attracted to classes that you were teaching. You know, are you getting more males these days? I'm just curious as to what your demographic is as to who's taking your class.
I think it's a fair question. And actually, there are usually more young women than young men, but the young men will take 4 or 5 classes. Like once you, yes. That once you get this, like, maybe it's the candy, but it's like putting breadcrumbs out for raccoons or something. It's like they start to come back so that I have, like Dave Lashare, who's my student. There are the men who realize that, you know, the men who are feminists, the men who are at ease with who they are. I'm teaching a course. There are probably, there are 30 something students and there are probably 13 men in the class. So there are a lot of them. I mean, I'm a cross between, like, you know, the stepmother in Snow White and Betty Crocker, although they would know who Betty Crocker was. And so they're not scared of me as soon as they get into the class and realize what's going on. This semester, I'm teaching a horror in literature class, which is really fun. Oh, okay, I'll get to you in a second. And that has been fascinating because we started with, I'll give you the quick reading list because what I got to do in the books. We started with The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Great. They made movies out of it, but the book is still absolutely brilliant. Then we read Rosemary's Baby, okay, which reading it now is fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. Did Rosemary's Baby, then a less well-known book, but it was a huge bestseller in its day, called The House Next Door, which is terrifying. and is really unnerving, and it's wonderful. It turns out, without thinking of it, that all the books are about real estate. They really are. The next book we did was The Shining, and now we're ending with Beloved. Because Beloved, I taught it in many contexts, but it is also a gothic horror novel. And it really works with the revenant, with the ghost coming back. And is she coming back out of love, or is she coming back to exact revenge? I mean, it's been a really good course. And the guys in the class are, are vocal, they're interested. The women are talking about, well, Rosemary's Baby. She's, her husband basically sells her to the devil, so that she can bear the Antichrist. And it takes exactly 1 hour for her husband. Guy has a conversation with the guy who's the head Satanist while the women are washing the dishes. An hour. And they were like, that's not long enough. It's like, right, that's not long enough. And the use of women's bodies is the subversion of enslaved people and the rest of it. And then we get to Beloved, and we're talking about enslaved people. And I had a couple of students in my class who were saying, this book is too horrific in terms of history to be a horror novel, which I thought also was fascinating. And then one kid, and this is why I still like teaching, one kid said, a guy in the back of the room put his hand up, they all have to put their hands up, that put his hands up and said, if you look under the hood of history, you will always find horror. And I thought, that's just a great line. That's really wonderful. I had never thought of something that succinct, but it's really true. You look under the hood of history, and that's the guys who are using. I'm sorry. I mean, most women would not look under the hood. It's not the first way they begin, but he gave a brilliant insight to that. Okay?
Just piggyback on that.
Okay.
I happened in my last English class in college was women, was women in crime. And my final paper was Lizzie Borden.
Oh, there we go. So we'll do the follow-up to Lizzie Borden. That'll be fun. Other questions, arguments? Over here. Oh, Meg. Okay.
I'm curious about whether you can talk about your rationale for the order the essays appear in the book. I love the way that every time readers turn to a new essay, it's a brand new topic, and yet some of the themes return later on. So I was wondering if you had a specific philosophy for organizing the pieces.
What a great question. And Meg works with Woodhall Press. It's a good justification for looking at how it put together. I put, again, I start with Jane Smiley, because this is like putting together a mall, and you want the anchor store in the front. So Jane Smiley writing an original piece, she chooses Jane Lynch, the actor, right? The comic actor, and says, I want you to play me in the movie of my life. But you'll have to play me with 4 different husbands. Jane Smiley has said 4 different husbands, and at these different times of my life. And can you do a St. Louis accent, the flat tones of the Midwestern accent, but you're tall the way I am, and your name is Jane. So it's like, okay, somebody has an electronic device. No, I hope we won something. That's all I had to say. I just hope that was a winning announcement. And so I put together, the Molly Peacock, who's an amazing poet, and Phillis Levin, another a poet of the American Academy of Poets. They write about each other as famous women. They've been lifelong friends. So I put some of those up front, but yes, the idea is that the essays are clumped, not quite by topic, but by conversation. I really did see this. I know my time is getting up. That I really did see this as groups of women sitting at a party. So there are some who are sitting at the table and having long, deep conversations with the people, and they're eating with real cutlery and not drinking too much. Then there are some out on the patio who are indulging, and somebody's having a cigarette, and somebody's having some weed, and they're out on the balcony, and you want to make sure. And then there are other people who are, sitting in a window seat, and they're just talking about literary texts and writing. And there are some women who are practicing their sharpshooting, but hopefully not reaching their targets. And so there are a lot of different conversations going on in the book. So I tried to put them as if I was categorizing them by the different people who had something in common, but then who moved easily. But that's one of the things that's hard, because it's not alphabetical order. I'm sorry, it's not alphabetical order, but thank you, Nick, for saying that every time you go to a new essay, it's a different voice, it's a different approach. It's somebody writing from a different background, a different age. There's not a lot of uniformity in the book, and that's one of the things I'm proud of. Tilly, you had a question? You want to come up? Or you want to ask it from there? Tilly? Okay, I have a question, but I think that Tilly was suggesting that she likes her family, and as far as I'm concerned, everybody who reads the book is family. So I'm gonna end on that.